3 months had passed since Maria Torres walked out of the Great Hall. 3 months since humanity closed its borders and came home. And in those 3 months, everything had changed. General Ben Carter stood at the window of the Orbital Command Center above Mars. The red planet turned slowly below him, covered with domes and towers that humans had built with their own hands. No alien help, no Concord technology, just human determination and human sweat. He watched as another transport ship docked at the station. It carried the last group of human workers from the Velthari Outer Territories. They had been forced to leave quickly, with only what they could carry. The Velthari had not been kind about the departure. "How many more?" Ben asked. Lieutenant Katie Morris checked her screen. She was young, barely 30, with red hair and a face full of freckles, but she was one of the best communication officers in the fleet. "This is the last group from Velthari space. We still have 2 ships coming from Corvan territory and 1 from the neutral zones. Everyone should be home within the week." Ben nodded. "Good. What about our equipment?" "Gone. The Corvans seized everything in their space. The Velthari took our research stations and farming equipment. The other species picked through whatever was left." "Let them have it. They will not know how to use it anyway." This was true, and both of them knew it. Human technology was not just about the machines. It was about the people who understood how those machines worked. Without human engineers to maintain them, the stolen equipment would fail within months. On Earth, Dr. Amy Lawson worked around the clock at the Lunar Research Institute. She had been the chief scientist there for 12 years, and now she faced the biggest challenge of her career. Earth needed to become completely self-sufficient, and she had to make it happen. Her office was filled with screens showing data from every human colony in the solar system. Mars was producing food at maximum capacity. The mining operations on the moons of Jupiter were doubling their output. Titan's fuel refineries were working overtime. "We can do this," she said to her assistant, a young man named Peter Hall. "We have everything we need right here in our own system." Peter looked worried. "What about the materials we used to import? The rare metals from the Corvan mines, the medical compounds from the Velthari?" "We find alternatives. We build new processes. We adapt." Amy smiled, though it did not reach her eyes. That is what humans do. While Earth prepared for isolation, the rest of the galaxy began to fall apart. The first signs were small. A trade route that usually ran on time was delayed by a week. A communication relay went offline, and no one knew how to fix it. A factory that produced replacement parts for starship engines closed because the human technicians who ran it had gone home. The Velthari High Minister Korax dismissed these problems as temporary. He announced that his people would quickly learn to operate the human technology they had taken. He promised that life would return to normal within days. Days became weeks, weeks became months, and nothing got better. Captain Daniel Shaw commanded the carrier Endurance on its final journey home. His ship had been stationed at a joint peacekeeping base near the border between Velthari and Corvan space. He had watched that border closely for 5 years, keeping the peace between 2 species that hated each other. Now, as his ship passed through Concord territory for the last time, he saw what happened when humans were not there to keep things calm. "I am picking up weapons fire near the Velthari colony on Nexus 4. Daniel moved to the sensor station and looked at the readings. 2 Velthari warships were attacking a Corvan freighter. The freighter was burning, spinning slowly as escape pods launched from its sides. "Can we help them?" someone asked. Daniel shook his head. "We are not Concord peacekeepers anymore. We have no authority here." "Those are civilians, Captain." "I know." Daniel's voice was heavy with sorrow. "But if we intervene, we give them a reason to attack us. We give them someone else to blame. The best thing we can do for those people is to go home and let the galaxy see what it has become without us." The Endurance continued on its path. Behind them, the Corvan freighter exploded in a flash of light. Back on Earth, Secretary of Defense Kevin Price called a meeting of the highest military and civilian leaders. They gathered in a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a room that had been built to survive the end of the world. Maria Torres sat at the long table, still wearing the formal clothes she had worn in the Concord Hall 3 months ago. She had not taken a day off since the withdrawal. There was too much to do. Admiral Nathan Cole sat beside her, along with General Carter, Dr. Lawson, and a dozen others. They represented every part of human civilization, and they all looked tired. Kevin Price stood at the head of the table. He was a tall man with dark skin and a calm voice that made people trust him. "We have all seen the reports," he said. "The Concord is falling apart faster than we expected. The Velthari and Corvan are already fighting. 3 other species have closed their borders. The central government has stopped functioning." "Good," Admiral Cole said. "Let them suffer. They wanted to know what the galaxy looked like without us. Now they know." "Nathan," Maria's voice was gentle but firm. "We did not leave to watch them burn. We left to protect ourselves. And we are protected. Our borders are secure. Our people are safe. What happens out there is not our concern." Dr. Lawson spoke up. "It will become our concern. When their civilization collapses completely, they will become desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things." Kevin nodded. "That is why we are here. We need to decide what we do when they come asking for help, because they will come. It is only a matter of time." The room fell silent as everyone considered the question. Maria thought about all the years she had spent building relationships with alien species. She thought about the friends she had made, the treaties she had signed, the wars she had helped prevent. All of that was gone now, destroyed by the arrogance of leaders who saw humans as tools instead of partners. But she also thought about the ordinary people on those alien worlds. The farmers who just wanted to feed their families. The children who had never done anything wrong. The young officers like the ones Daniel Shaw had told her about, who had treated humans with respect even when their governments did not. "When they come," Maria said slowly, "we listen. We do not promise anything, we do not commit to anything, but we listen." Admiral Cole shook his head. "That is weakness. They will see it as an invitation to push us again." "No," Maria met his eyes. "Listening is not weakness, it is patience. They humiliated us because they thought we were small. We will show them that we are not small. We will show them that we can wait and watch and choose our moment. And when that moment comes, we will set the terms." "Does anyone disagree?" No one spoke. "Then we wait," Kevin said. "We build our strength. We prepare for whatever comes next. And we remember what they did to us, so we never let it happen again." Outside the bunker, night was falling over Earth. Stars appeared in the sky, the same stars that humans had reached for and touched. Those stars were quiet now, but they would not stay quiet for long. The galaxy was breaking, and sooner or later, it would come knocking at humanity's door. 1 year after humanity closed its borders, the galaxy was dying. The Velthari outer colonies had been the first to fall. The great farms that fed billions of people stopped working 3 months after the human engineers left. The irrigation systems broke down. The soil treatment machines failed. The weather control satellites drifted out of position and could not be corrected. High Minister Korax had promised his people that Velthari scientists would learn to operate the human technology. He had been wrong. The machines were too complex. The systems were too connected. Pull one thread, and the whole fabric came apart. By the 6th month, the outer colonies were starving. Ships carried food from the inner worlds, but there was not enough. There was never enough. People began to die, first in dozens, then in hundreds, then in thousands. Korax blamed the humans. He gave speeches about how Earth had sabotaged the equipment before leaving. He called for revenge against the species that had abandoned the Concorde. But his people were hungry, and hungry people do not listen to speeches. The Corvan faced a different disaster. Their navigation networks had been built by human engineers 30 years ago. The systems were stable and reliable, and the Corvan had never bothered to learn how they worked. Why would they? The humans maintained everything. The humans fixed every problem. The humans were always there. Until they were not. 8 months after the withdrawal, a routine software update corrupted the core navigation database. Ships began jumping to the wrong coordinates. Some arrived in empty space, far from any star. Some arrived inside asteroid fields and were destroyed. Some simply disappeared and were never found. General Vorn, the same Corvan leader who had demanded that Earth surrender its technology, tried to fix the problem with force. He ordered his engineers to work faster. He threatened punishment for failure. He executed 3 technicians who could not repair systems they had never been taught to understand. Nothing worked. The navigation network continued to fail. Trade routes became death traps. The Corvan economy, built on moving goods between 100 worlds, collapsed within weeks. Lieutenant Katie Morris sat at her station near the border of human space. Her job was to monitor communications from the Concorde, to watch and listen and report what she learned. She had been doing this work for a year now, and every day the news got worse. Today, she received a message that surprised her. It came through a channel that should not have existed, an emergency frequency that humans had set up years ago for use by friendly contacts in alien governments. Katie had checked this channel every day since the withdrawal. It had always been silent. Until now. The message was simple. It contained a name, a location, and a request for contact. The name was Threll. The location was a small station on the edge of Corvan space. The request was one word: help. Katie stared at the message for a long moment. Then she forwarded it to General Carter. Threll was young for a Corvan officer, barely past the age when his people considered someone an adult. He had served on a joint mission with human peacekeepers 2 years ago, before the withdrawal. He had learned to respect humans during that time. He had learned that the things his government said about them were lies. Now he sat in a small room on a forgotten station, waiting for a response that might never come. Around him, his world was falling apart. His family on the homeworld had not received food shipments in 3 weeks. His friends in the military were being sent on missions with broken navigation systems, missions they might not return from. He had watched his government lie to its people about what was happening. He had heard the propaganda about human sabotage and human treachery. He knew the truth was simpler and more terrible. The Corvan had never appreciated what they had, and now it was gone. The communication screen flickered. A human face appeared. It was a woman with red hair and freckles. "This is Lieutenant Katie Morris of Earth Defense Command. I received your message. Who are you, and what do you want?" Threll leaned forward. His hands were shaking. "My name is Threll. I served with your Captain Daniel Shaw on the peacekeeping mission at Nexus 7. He can confirm my identity. I am reaching out because my people are dying, and our government will not admit the truth." "What truth?" "The truth that we needed you. The truth that everything we built depended on human knowledge and human skill. The truth that we treated you like servants when you were the ones holding our civilization together." Threll paused. "I am not asking for myself. I am asking for the millions of ordinary people who had no part in what our leaders did to you." There was silence on the channel. Threll waited, barely breathing. "I will pass your message to my superiors," Katie finally said. "I cannot promise anything. I understand. Thank you for listening." The screen went dark. Threll sat alone in the small room and wondered if he had done the right thing. On Mars, General Carter brought the message to the Council of Human Leaders. They gathered in the same bunker where they had met a year ago. But the mood was different now. They were no longer afraid. They were no longer uncertain. They had watched the galaxy tear itself apart, and they had survived. Maria Torres read Threll's words carefully. "He is telling the truth," she said. "I remember Captain Shaw mentioning him. He was one of the few Corvan who treated our people with respect." Admiral Cole shook his head. "One decent officer does not make up for what his government did." "No, it does not, but it tells us something important." Maria looked around the table. Not everyone in the Concord supported what happened. There were people who disagreed with their leaders, people who valued what we brought to the galaxy. Those people are suffering now, just like the ones who wanted us gone. Dr. Amy Lawson pulled up data on her screen. "The situation is worse than we thought. 3 species are at war with each other. 2 more face extinction-level resource shortages. The Concord Central Authority has completely dissolved. There is no one in charge anymore." Kevin Price rubbed his temples. "How long before the fighting spreads to our borders?" 6 months, maybe less. Once they run out of things to fight over among themselves, they will look for new targets. We are the obvious choice." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Earth was strong, but not strong enough to fight the entire galaxy. Maria stood and walked to the window. Outside, the stars were bright and cold. "We have a choice to make," she said. "We can wait for them to come to us as enemies, or we can reach out and shape what happens next. We can let the galaxy burn completely, or we can help them rebuild in a way that serves our interests." "You want to help them?" Cole's voice was sharp. "After everything they did?" "I want to survive. I want humanity to have a future. And I believe the best way to ensure that future is to be the ones who put the galaxy back together." Maria turned to face the council, not as servants, not as tools, but as leaders. The silence stretched on. Finally, Kevin Price spoke. "How do we do that?" Maria smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We wait a little longer. We let them get desperate enough to accept whatever terms we offer. And then we make them an offer they cannot refuse." Outside the bunker, the stars continued to shine, but now they seemed less cold. Now they seemed like something that could be reached for again. 18 months after humanity closed its borders, a fleet of alien ships appeared at the edge of the solar system. There were 12 vessels in total, 1 from each species that had been part of the old Concord. They were not warships. They were diplomatic transports, small and unarmed, carrying representatives who had come to beg. Admiral Nathan Cole watched them approach from the command center above Mars. His finger hovered over the defense grid controls. One word from him, and those ships would cease to exist. "Sir," Katie Morris said from her station, "they are transmitting on the diplomatic frequency. They request permission to enter our space." Nathan did not move his hand. "What do they want?" he asked. "They want to talk." For a long moment, Nathan stared at the screen showing the alien fleet. These were the same species that had insulted humanity, the same governments that had tried to steal their technology, the same leaders who had promised to make Earth suffer for daring to leave the Concord. Now they came with their hands open, asking for mercy. "Let them in," Nathan finally said, "but they stay on the outer station. They do not get any closer to Earth." The meeting took place on Neptune Station, a human facility orbiting the ice giant at the far edge of the solar system. It was cold and remote, the perfect place to remind the aliens how far they were from everything that mattered. Ambassador Maria Torres arrived first, accompanied by Admiral Cole and a security detail of 30 armed soldiers. She wore the same formal clothes she had worn in the Concord Hall, the same one she had worn when she walked away. A small detail, but one she knew the aliens would notice. The alien delegations arrived one by one. Some Maria recognized. Others were new faces, replacements for leaders who had fallen from power during the chaos of the past year and a half. The Velthari delegation was led by a female named Senna. She was smaller than Korax had been, with softer features, and eyes that held something Korax never had: shame. Korax himself was gone, removed from office by his own people after the famine became impossible to hide. The Korvan delegation was led by Threll, the young officer who had reached out through back channels. He was now a senior diplomat, promoted quickly as the old government collapsed. He walked with the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. They gathered in a large conference room, with windows that looked out at the stars. Maria sat at the head of the table, with Nathan standing behind her. The aliens arranged themselves in a half-circle facing her. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was heavy with history. Senna broke it first. She stood and bowed her head toward Maria. Ambassador Torres, on behalf of the Velthari people, I offer our deepest apologies for the actions of our previous government. High Minister Korax acted without wisdom and without honor. He has been removed from power and will face justice for his crimes against both our people and yours. Maria nodded, but said nothing. Threll spoke next. The Korvan Collective also offers its apologies. General Vorn and those who supported his demands have been arrested. We understand now what we refused to see before. Humanity was never our servant. You were our partner, and we treated you with contempt that was not deserved. Other delegates added their own apologies. Some seemed sincere. Others were clearly just saying what they thought Maria wanted to hear. She listened to all of them without expression. When the last delegate finished, Maria stood. I have heard your words, she said. Now let me tell you what I see. She walked to the window and looked out at the stars. I see a galaxy that is falling apart. I see worlds that are starving. I see species that are at war with each other over resources they could have shared. I see billions of people suffering because their leaders were too proud to treat us with basic respect. She turned back to face the delegates. We did not cause this suffering. We simply stopped preventing it. For 30 years, humanity worked to hold your civilization together. We asked for nothing in return, except to be treated fairly. You refused. And now you come to us, not because you have learned to value us, but because you have no other choice. Senna lowered her head. That is true. But does the reason matter? We need your help. Our people are dying. The reason matters to us, Nathan Cole said. His voice was hard. It matters because once we help you, we need to know you will not turn on us again the moment you are strong enough. What do you want? Threll asked. Tell us your terms. We will accept whatever you require. Maria smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who held all the power and knew it. Here are our terms, she said. First, humanity will never again be a member of any organization we do not control. We will help you rebuild, but we will do so as equals, not subordinates. We will have full voting rights on any council that governs the new order. The delegates nodded. This was expected. Second, all human technology remains human property. You may use it, but you may not claim it as your own. Any species that attempts to seize our work will be permanently excluded from our assistance. More nods. This was also expected. Third, human citizens will be granted diplomatic immunity in all participating territories. No human will be arrested, detained, or harassed by any alien government without our consent. Any violation of this rule will be treated as an act of war. The delegates shifted uncomfortably. This was a significant demand, but they nodded anyway. Fourth, and most important, Maria paused and looked each delegate in the eye. You will remember. You will teach your children what happened when you tried to treat us as lesser beings. You will build monuments to the humans who died during your famines and wars, the aid workers and engineers who stayed behind to help, even as your governments threatened them. And you will never forget that this galaxy only functions when all species are valued equally. The room was silent. The delegates looked at each other, uncertain. These terms are harsh, Senna said quietly. These terms are fair, Maria replied. You wanted to know what the galaxy looked like without us. If you want our help, this is the price. If you do not want to pay it, you are free to leave and handle your problems on your own. No one moved toward the door. Threll stood. The Korvan Collective accepts these terms. Senna followed. The Velthari accept as well. One by one, the other delegates stood and announced their acceptance. When the last one finished, Maria allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Then let us begin, she said. Within days, human ships were moving through the galaxy again. Captain Daniel Shaw led the first relief convoy into Velthari space, carrying food and medical supplies to worlds that had been starving for months. Dr. Amy Lawson traveled to Korvan territory with a team of engineers to repair the navigation networks. The work was hard and dangerous. Some alien citizens blamed humanity for their suffering and attacked the aid workers. Some local governments tried to seize supplies meant for distribution. But the human teams pushed through every obstacle, driven by something the aliens had never expected: compassion. Why are you helping us? A Velthari farmer asked Daniel Shaw as human volunteers unloaded grain onto his barren world. After what we did to you? Daniel thought about the question for a moment. Because someone has to, he said, and because we want to show you who we really are, not the servants you thought we were. Not the enemies your leaders tried to make us into. Just people trying to do the right thing. The farmer stared at him for a long moment. Then he bowed his head in a gesture of respect that Daniel had never seen a Velthari offer a human before. It was a small thing, but it was a beginning. And across the galaxy, millions of small things began to add up to something larger, something new, something that might, with time and effort, become something worth believing in. 5 years had passed since the collapse of the old Concord. 5 years of hard work, slow healing, and careful rebuilding. And now, at last, something new had risen from the ashes. They called it the Stellar Alliance. The founding ceremony took place on Nexus Prime, in the same great hall where Maria Torres had walked away from the Concord 5 years ago. But the hall looked different now. New banners hung from the crystal pillars, showing the symbols of 13 species working together as equals. The stone floor had been repaired with pieces from Earth, marking humanity's place among the founding members. Maria Torres stood at the central podium. She was older now, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that had not been there before. But her voice was still strong, and when she spoke, every being in the hall listened. We gather today to mark a new beginning, she said. Not a return to what was, but a step toward what could be. The old Concord failed because it was built on inequality. Some species were valued more than others. Some voices were heard, while others were silenced. We will not make that mistake again. She looked around the hall, at the thousands of beings assembled before her. Velthari and Korvan sat side by side, former enemies who had learned to work together. Smaller species who had been ignored under the old system now held equal votes on the governing council. Humanity stood among them, not as servants or masters, but as partners. The Stellar Alliance is built on 3 principles, Maria continued. First, that all species have equal worth and deserve equal respect. Second, that no civilization can thrive alone, that we need each other to face the challenges of an uncertain universe. And third, that the mistakes of the past must be remembered, so they are never repeated. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. I want to thank the humans who made this possible, the engineers who fixed broken worlds, the doctors who healed the sick and starving, the soldiers who kept the peace during the darkest days, and the diplomats who sat across tables from former enemies and found a way forward. She raised her head. I also want to thank the alien leaders who had the courage to admit their mistakes and work towards something better. This alliance belongs to all of us. The hall erupted in applause that lasted for several minutes. When it finally faded, Maria stepped back from the podium and took her seat on the governing council. She was the first Secretary General of the Stellar Alliance, elected by representatives of all 13 member species. It was a position she had never sought, but could not refuse. Admiral Nathan Cole watched the ceremony from a quiet corner of the hall. He had retired from military service 2 years ago, after the last of the refugee crises had been resolved and the borders were finally secure. Now he spent his days writing a memoir about the withdrawal period, trying to capture what it had felt like to watch the galaxy fall apart and then slowly come back together. His book would be published next year. The final chapter was about forgiveness, and it had been the hardest thing he had ever written. It is strange, is it not? A voice said beside him. Nathan turned to see Threll standing there. The Corvan was taller than he had been 5 years ago, broader in the shoulders. He wore the uniform of an Alliance officer, with medals that showed his service during the Reconstruction. What is strange? Nathan asked. 5 years ago, my people wanted to take everything from you. Now we stand together as allies. Threll shook his head slowly. I never imagined this was possible. Neither did I, Nathan admitted. For a long time, I wanted revenge. I wanted your people to suffer for what they did to us. And now? Nathan thought about the question. He thought about the years of anger he had carried, the nights he had spent planning for wars that never came. He thought about watching human volunteers risk their lives to save alien children on worlds that had once called humanity worthless. Now I understand that revenge would not have given me what I really wanted, he said. I wanted respect. I wanted to know that our sacrifices meant something. Revenge would not have given me that. But this, he gestured at the hall full of beings from different worlds, this does. Threll nodded slowly. My grandmother used to say that the strongest bridge is built from broken stones. I never understood what she meant until now. Captain Daniel Shaw stood at the entrance of the hall, watching the ceremony with quiet pride. He commanded the Alliance peacekeeping fleet now, with officers from every member species serving under him. His first officer was Threll. They had worked together for 3 years, patrolling the borders, responding to emergencies, keeping the peace that so many had died to achieve. It had not been easy. There were still tensions between species, still old hatreds that bubbled up from time to time. But every day, the Alliance grew a little stronger. Every day, the future seemed a little brighter. Katie Morris found Daniel after the ceremony ended. She was the head of the Interspecies Communication Network now, responsible for making sure every civilization in the Alliance could talk to every other. It was a big job, but she loved it. Nice speech, she said, nodding toward where Maria was greeting a line of delegates. She has always been good with words, Daniel replied. But the speech is not what matters. What matters is what we do next. And what is that? Daniel smiled. We keep going. We keep building. We keep showing them who we really are. On Earth, life had returned to something like normal. Children went to school and learned about the stars. Farmers tended their fields and complained about the weather. Cities hummed with activity, and people argued about politics and sports and all the small things that make up daily life. But there were differences, too. Every town had a memorial now, a simple stone pillar with the names of humans who had served in the Reconstruction. Schools taught the history of the withdrawal, making sure every generation understood what had happened and why. And at night, when people looked up at the stars, they saw something their grandparents never had. A galaxy where humanity had earned its place. Dr. Amy Lawson continued her research at the Lunar Institute, now funded by grants from a dozen grateful worlds. Her team included scientists from every Alliance species, working on projects that would have been impossible under the old Concord. They were developing new food production methods, new medical treatments, new ways to travel between the stars. The future was full of possibilities. Her favorite project was a simple one: a garden on Mars where plants from different worlds grew side by side. Velfari flowers next to Earth roses, Corvon vegetables beside human wheat. It was a small thing, but it reminded her every day of what they were building. Years later, when historians wrote about this period, they would call it the Great Turning Point, the moment when the galaxy stopped seeing humanity as clever animals who had stumbled into the stars, and started seeing them as what they truly were, a species that had earned its place not through conquest or domination, but through patience, compassion, and an unshakable belief in their own worth. Maria Torres did not live to see those history books. She died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 92, surrounded by family and friends from a dozen different worlds. Her funeral was attended by representatives of every Alliance species, and her name was carved into monuments on 100 planets. But she would not have cared about monuments. She would have cared about the young human girl who looked up at the night sky and dreamed of the stars, knowing that the universe was open to her. She would have cared about the Velthari child, who grew up hearing stories about the humans who saved his world. She would have cared about the future, spreading out before them like an endless ocean of light. That was her legacy. Not revenge, not conquest, just a simple truth, spoken once in a great hall and echoed across the centuries. We are not your servants. We are not your tools. We are your equals, and we always will be. The stars continued to shine, as they always had and always would. And among them, scattered across 1,000 worlds, the children of Earth and the children of other species looked up together, and they dreamed of what they would build next. The Great Hall of Nexus Prime was the largest room in the known galaxy. It could hold 10,000 beings from 100 different worlds. Crystal pillars rose toward a ceiling that showed the stars themselves, and the floor was made of stone from 12 different planets, each piece representing a founding member of the Galactic Concord. Ambassador Maria Torres stood at the human delegation's platform and looked across the hall at the alien faces watching her. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had skin that changed color with their moods. All of them looked at her with the same expression. It was the look someone gives to a servant who has forgotten their place. Maria had served as Earth's voice in this hall for 15 years. She had seen treaties signed and wars prevented. She had watched humanity grow from newcomers to essential members of the galactic community. Humans had built the translation systems that let all these species talk to each other. Human engineers had fixed the navigation networks that made travel between stars possible. Human doctors had cured diseases that threatened entire worlds, and still, they looked at her like she was nothing. The Velthari High Minister rose from his seat. His name was Korax, and he was tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes that held no warmth. The Velthari were an old species. They had traveled the stars when humans still lived in caves. They never let anyone forget this fact. The matter before us is simple, Korax said. His voice filled the hall, through speakers hidden in the walls. Earth possesses agricultural technology that could feed billions. The Velthari outer colonies face food shortages. We require this technology. Maria stepped forward. Earth is willing to share our farming methods. We propose a joint research program where both species benefit from the exchange. We can train Velthari scientists, and in return, we ask for access to your medical databases. Korax made a sound like grinding stones. It was the Velthari way of laughing. You misunderstand, Ambassador. We do not ask. We require. The Concord Charter states that member species must share essential technologies for the common good. You will give us what we need. That charter was written 300 years before Earth joined, Maria said. We never agreed to those terms. Your agreement is not required. Admiral Nathan Cole watched from the observation deck above the hall. He was a large man with gray hair and a face that showed decades of service. He had commanded fleets and won battles that saved millions of lives. But today, he could do nothing but watch and feel his anger grow. Beside him stood Captain Daniel Shaw, a younger officer with sharp eyes and quick hands. Daniel had served on joint missions with alien crews for 10 years. He knew how they thought. They are pushing too hard, Daniel said quietly. Something has changed. Nathan nodded. The Corvan are backing them. Look at their delegation. The Corvan were different from the Velthari. They were short and wide with thick arms and faces that seemed carved from rock. They valued strength and viewed kindness as weakness. Their representative, a general named Vorn, sat with his arms crossed and a smile on his face. When Korax finished speaking, Vorn stood. The Corvan Collective supports the Velthari position, he said. Furthermore, we demand that Earth surrender all navigation algorithms currently in use across Concord space. These systems were built on our stations. They belong to us. Maria felt her heart beat faster, but she kept her face calm. Those systems were designed and built by human engineers. Without our people, your navigation networks would have failed decades ago. Your engineers used our materials and our facilities. The work product belongs to the collective. That is not how partnership works. Vorn stepped closer to his platform's edge. Partnership? You think this is a partnership? Humans are children who found a door to the stars and stumbled through. You exist in this Concord because we allow it. Do not forget your place. The hall fell silent. Maria looked around at the other delegations. Some avoided her eyes. Others watched with curiosity, waiting to see how the humans would respond. None spoke in Earth's defense. Admiral Cole gripped the railing of the observation deck. His knuckles turned white. She needs to walk away, Daniel said. If she stays, they will only push harder. Maria knows what she's doing, Nathan replied, but he was not certain. Below, Maria took a slow breath. She had prepared for this moment, though she had hoped it would never come. Earth's leaders had discussed what to do if the Concord turned against them. They had made plans. They had built defenses. They had prepared for the worst. She had never wanted to use those preparations. I propose a compromise, Maria said. Earth will establish shared research facilities on neutral ground. All participating species will have equal access to the results. We will train your engineers and scientists. In exchange, we ask only for recognition of our contributions and fair treatment under Concord law. Korax did not even consider the offer. Unacceptable. You will comply with the original demands, or you will face sanctions. What kind of sanctions? Trade restrictions, travel bans, seizure of human assets in Concord space. And if you still refuse, we will consider your defiance an act of aggression against the Concord itself. Maria felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. Behind her, the human delegation sat in silence. They were diplomats and advisors, scientists and translators. They had given their lives to building bridges between worlds, and now those bridges were burning. She looked up at the observation deck and met Admiral Cole's eyes. He gave her a small nod. Maria reached up and removed the translation device from her ear. She set it on the podium in front of her. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear, and the universal translators carried her words to every corner of the hall. For 30 years, humanity has served this Concord with honor. We have asked for nothing but respect. We have given everything we had. We fixed your machines. We healed your sick. We stood between your enemies and your children. And you have repaid us with contempt." She paused and looked around the hall one last time. "Earth withdraws from the Galactic Concord, effective immediately. Our borders are closed. Our people will return home. And you will learn what this galaxy looks like without us." The silence that followed was absolute. 10,000 beings sat frozen in their seats. No species had ever left the Concord. It was unthinkable. It was impossible. And yet, Maria Torres turned and walked away. Admiral Cole was already moving. He spoke into his communicator, issuing orders to every human ship and station in Concord space. The withdrawal had begun. As Maria reached the exit, Corax called after her. "You will regret this, human. When your people starve and your worlds burn, you will come crawling back." Maria stopped at the door. She did not turn around. "No," she said. "We will not." And then she was gone, and the galaxy would never be the same.